I love plants and I love knitting, and as a knitwear designer it's kind of inevitable that some botanical inspiration would make its way into my work, and so I thought I would just give you a whistle-stop tour of my more obviously planty inspired designs. There are some that take inspiration from nature in a more general way that I haven't included here. And I also wanted to include some designs from other designers, but when I was gathering my samples I realised I have so many of my own, so I'm going to do another video later on of other people's designs that are planty and botanically inspired that I would knit if I had knitting time to knit other people's designs rather than constantly working on my own. So without further ado, I'm going to work on these in roughly chronological order, but I shall start with the one I'm wearing because that's the most obvious. So this is Boscul, which I designed back in 2010. It is inspired by the branches of trees as you're looking upwards in the winter, once they've lost all of their leaves, and you kind of get that crisscrossing of the branches silhouetted against the sky. And obviously it also kind of looks like roots as well, which trees mirror themselves nicely. So the yarn is Galor. The main body, the main colour is their number 2, which is a fingering weight, is an undyed Shetland, and I believe this colour was called Shale, but I don't actually remember. I'm going to be putting links to all of these patterns in the description box below so that you can find them easily, and that will include yarn details as well. And the contrast colour is also Galor. It's Pentland, which is a Romney lamb's wool. They're both woolen spun, and the colour for this one is Willow. So this I did on a, I believe it was a 3.5mm needle, which is quite loose for a fingering weight 4-ply yarn. But because it's woolen spun, it's got so much sort of bounce to it that it sort of fills up the gaps nicely, and it makes for a really lightweight knit, which I end up wearing a lot. Like, this is one of my most worn knits. And it's held up really, really nicely. There's like a little bit of fuzziness, but minimal pilling. And like some of my knits I have to depill really regularly, but this one not so. So next one is sort of a set of designs. So this is Wayod, this is the hat. So I made this version first with kind of a springy colour combination, and then this one with more of an autumnal feel. And this is with my Mendip DK yarn, so it's hand dyed. This grey is the undyed cloudy base. The green here is fern. There's not quite enough contrast here for it to show up really clearly, but I think that sort of pretty, that subtle colour work is quite pretty. So this is fern, but if you wanted more colour, the colour U is a much darker green, and I'm really tempted to do that myself. And then this is beech and fox, again both on the cloudy base. So this is a much bigger size, which I made for my husband, and this is the middle size, so the size 2. There are 3 sizes in the hat pattern, and it's just kind of, it's got quite long ribbing, and this one has been laid flat for a while, so I've designed it so it's got just a little bit of slouch to it, and you can work more repeats of the branchy pattern higher up if you want it to be longer. And you can also double brim it, because that keeps it really nice and toasty. And for ages after I designed this hat, I wanted to turn it into a yoke pattern, so that's exactly what I did. So this is the Wayod yoke, and this has the double folded neckline. So it's you start from the neckband and you work it sort of double length, and then you fold it in and stitch it down at the end. We've got some short rows at the back, and little branchy colour work at the bottom, and then at the hem, sorry, at the cuffs, and then at the hem we've got just like these little, I like to think of them as sort of tiny pine saplings, like little tree shoots. So this, I originally intended it to be fern fronds, but also it can work as pine trees or fir trees, like more coniferous ones. But this one, again, gets loads of wear. I think the fact that this one's really neutral helps. It just means it goes with everything in my wardrobe. And the colour work, most of my colour work is designed so that you do not have long floats that you have to catch. So there are no floats to catch in this or this, because I just make sure that I don't have too long stretches of a single colour. And the contrast colour is the same as the main colour on this one. So this is the natural sheep and beach, both on the cloudy base. Then we have Galor, which is probably my second most popular design, which is honestly was unexpected for me because I thought it was quite a niche design. So this is, it's an open cardigan, so there's no fastening. It's got colour work round the front band and going behind the neck. It's nicely symmetrical, just because I like that. So the leaves go upwards on both sides of the front, rather than going up one side and down the other. And you've got the colour work again on the quite wide cuffs because there's no sleeve shaping. And then the colour work is faced so that you don't have exposed floats because it's an open cardigan and I don't like that, and a folded hem. So it's all finished off really, really neatly on any bits that might be visible when you're wearing it. And it's just a lovely thing to chuck on for layering. Like I wear it a lot throughout the summer when summer's a bit disappointing. But also when it gets chillier, like it's great to chuck on top of a jumper if the jumper isn't warm enough. I'm a cold person. I wear knits most of the time. So this one does have steeks. The front is steeked, the armholes are steeked, and there's an interesting steeking situation at the bottom of the front band because I've talked before about how I do not like working colour work flat. If that is something you enjoy, then all power to you, but I don't. And so we've got steeks in this one. And then we have Platum, which is a set of hat and fingerless mitts, which are inspired by the leaves on Viburnum plicatum, which is a lovely, lovely shrub. Beautiful colour in the autumn, lovely flowers in early summer. And this, so it's basically a DK weight. My sample of the hat is quite short because I quite like a nicely fitted hat. And also it doesn't get super cold here, so if you've got a bit of ear exposed at the bottom, it doesn't matter. But you can work more repeats of the cables to make a longer hat, and obviously you can double up the brim. It's got cables, it's got moss stitch, it's got lots of things I enjoy. The mitts, they have long ribbing on the hand, so you can wear them like that, or you can fold the ribbing back, which means that you have full use of your fingers, so they're quite practical. And again, they've got the cable motif there. They've got slightly uneven ribbing on the back of the hand, so that the ribbing flows into the cable pattern perfectly, because I enjoy that. You've got the same on the brim of the hat as well. Now these were designed in my Mendip 4-ply yarn, held together with Kaya Baby Alpaca, which is a yarn I am no longer doing, but effectively it's a DK weight, and I've been meaning to make up a sample of the set in my Mend It DK because that would work beautifully. But again, very constrained on knitting time. And then this one, this is an incredibly lightweight garment. This is Dryopteris. The botanically knowledgeable amongst you might recognise that as one of Britain's native ferns, which inspired the stitch pattern that runs up the sides of the body and then round the armholes up onto the shoulder. And there's a nice bit of symmetry on the top of the shoulder. So this one is worked bottom up. Oh, I forgot to mention on the yoke designs, they're top down. Galor is bottom up, and then the sleeves are picked up and worked top down. This one is bottom up, and then the shoulders are worked with a three needle bind off. The body is worked in the round, and then you separate front and back at the underarms. This is in wool decanted, vintage 24 ply. So this is an undyed yarn, but they have some pretty dyed colours as well. It's a very fine yarn. It's, how much is it? I think it's 210 metres to 50 grams. So it's very lightweight. It's sort of on the lightest end of 4 ply you can get before you start getting into sort of lace weight. I knitted this on 2.5mm needles with 2mm needles for the hem and ribbing edges. And that is why, well, that's basically why it doesn't have sleeves. Like, I wasn't going to knit sleeves on 2.5mm needles. It wasn't going to happen. But as a lightweight top, as a sort of warm body base layer, it's a really lovely one. You can wear it underneath lots of other things or on its own in warmer weather where there's still a bit of a chill. Wool is super breathable, so it is nice when the weather starts getting warmer, as long as you're not like overheating. Again, I'm in England. It tends not to get super warm here, and I wore this throughout a lot of the summer we've just had because the weather was rubbish pretty much consistently. So this one gets a lot of wear, and I really like to wear it with Galor on top. That's my sort of summer isn't being as summery as it should be kind of knitted outfit. And then we have Rhyme Flower. I love this one. I love this one so much. This one was a limited edition alpaca yarn, which I don't have any more of, but it would work nicely in, it's a sport weight basically. You would knit it at a sport weight gauge. But again, because it's a hat, like it's a bit flexible, you could knit it in a heavy-ish 4 ply, or you could knit it at a denser gauge in a DK and it would work out nicely. So this one is inspired by frost on hydrangea flowers. I think I prefer hydrangeas more in the winter than I do in the summer. Just when the flowers have all dried out, they look so beautiful, and they're one of the things that's still sort of delicate and pretty in the garden, rather than the slightly skeletal look of most other plants that aren't evergreen. And when you get a nice frosty morning, just the rime frost on them is so beautiful. Again, a slightly short hat, but there's some space up the top here before you start the crown decreases, so you could make it longer and slouchier. This one has corrugated ribbing at the edge and a kind of, I really like the way the cast on goes, and you just have that kind of delicate little edge there. I really love this hat. I just think it's so sweet. And it just feels like it's perfect for properly chilly, frosty weather, even though it's not, it's a slightly lightweight one. The fabric isn't super dense with the alpaca, but it's very, very fuzzy, so it's warm, but not necessarily like insulative against the wind. but I really, really do like this one. Then we have Rosa Folia. This one is covered in Kemp from my carpet. We'll just ignore that. This was inspired by freshly emerging rose leaves in the spring. The year I designed this, the rose leaves started coming out much, much earlier than expected. And the rose we have just outside our living room window has these beautiful sort of dark reddish purpley leaves when they come out fresh, and then they turn green later on. Apparently that's an indication of a Chinese descendant in the rose genealogy, which I found really interesting. I think my father told me that. Whether it's true or not, who knows, but he does know a lot about plants. So this is called Rosa Folia, which is a sort of made up Latin word meaning rose leaf. And this one, I've said I like sort of shortish hats. This one I think I went a bit extreme on that. It looks sort of like a skull cap. But there are, usually my hat patterns have 3 sizes. This one has 5. It does sit quite nicely like that. But also it can double as a hat for my kid. And so the pattern does have sizes from child up to adult. And I've been meaning to make a more sort of slouchy version of this one because I think it's really pretty. And I do love the way that when it's fitted tight, it shows off the cables really nicely. But I would just like a slouchy version as well because I think that would be super cute. So the yarn is John Arbon Yarnadelic, which is a sport weight. It's knitted at a very dense gauge, so it should be super warm. And I really like the crown decreases. I think they're cute. And the colorway on this one is Les Fleurs, which I think is a very pretty color. It's one of those where it's hard to decide whether it's sort of pink or red or purple, or even sometimes brown in some lights, but it's a lovely one. And then another set. This one is at Hedera. Again, a stupid, not actually Latin, like, I'm making a silly pun. Hedera is the botanical Latin for ivy. This has ivy on it. I should know what the yarn is for this one. I believe it's Signet. It's a sock yarn. It's superwash merino with some nylon in it, which is not to my taste. And again, I would like to make up some samples in my Mendip 4-ply because I have kits available using a couple of my colours. But I haven't actually made a sample yet. I did originally do my swatch in Mendip 4-ply for this. So the hat just has... See, this is a little bit tight because I basically didn't account for the fact that this yarn, being superwash and having nylon in it, doesn't really have much stretch to it. It doesn't have the nice bounce that I like from a proper woolly wool yarn. But I think this one is really, really cute. And so it is very obviously inspired by creeping ivy, like up a wall or up the trunk of a tree. And then you've got the cowl, which each section of ivy goes in a different direction. So these ones go that way, and those ones go that way. And the cowl is designed so that you can double wrap. Behold, it is I. So it's super snuggly once you've got it double wrapped, and you can kind of arrange it so that it looks all cute. And again, you've got corrugated ribbing at the edge, like I did on Rhyme Flower, which I just think is a really nice way on a colourwork pattern to kind of include both colours, because I do really like using the contrast colour for ribbing on designs that have quite a large expanse of the main colour and then a smaller amount of the contrast colour. I like to use the contrast on the edgings to sort of tie it all together. But I also like the corrugated ribbing as a sort of slightly more complex looking way to do that. I'm not going to be able to get both loops off at once. Again, if this yarn was stretchier. So it is a 4-ply yarn, so fingering weight, but quite light on the fingering weight. And the cowl, you could do it in any yarn weight and just change the number of repeats if you want to amend the length. Yeah, but I really like this motif and I'd love to use it on a garment. Whether I just do like a jumper with the motif just around the hem and the cuffs, or whether I'd repeat it on the body, don't know. Something I've not given an enormous amount of thought to, but occasionally it just creeps in the back of my head. It's like, you should do an ivy jumper. And then I don't have a sample for this one because it is still in Germany, and I should have got the page ready. I always do this. Hedgebind. This is a design I did for Making Stories. This is issue 12 of Making Stories magazine, which I currently have a couple of copies left of in my shop. And it's got this huge colourwork panel on the front, which is easily the most complex chart I've ever designed. I spent a very long time working on that one. And it's inspired by bindweed, as much as I, as a gardener, hate it as a plant. It's awful, it gets everywhere, it's so horrible. It's not technically invasive because it's native here, but it behaves in an invasive manner. It strangles other plants, it gets everywhere, it spreads very, very quickly. But as a child, I always loved it because the flowers are so pretty and so delicate, and I always wanted a dress that was made out of the petals of bindweed flowers because there's something about them. You know, they're sort of drapey and clingy, and sort of, if you stroke them, there's like a slight drag to them. There's something mesmerizing about the way the flowers feel, and they're just really delicate and pretty. And so I designed that one as a person who likes aesthetics rather than a person who is working in their garden, because I wouldn't wear the jumper for gardening anyway. So I will be getting the sample back and the rights back for that one, but not yet. And then finally, I'm not going to talk about it in great detail because it isn't out yet, but it will be out in December. Behind me is Tree Hay, which is going to be part of my West Country collection, which is in development. It's nearing readiness. It's going to be released in mid-December, and that one is inspired by, so the collection, the concept of the collection is that all of the yarns are from the West Country, which is where I live, so the southwest of England, and all of the yarns are local to me and have been completely grown, produced, spun in the southwest of England. And I've been to visit the farms. So this yarn is from Boscul farm, which is about 20 minutes drive from me. And the design is inspired by a visit I took there last year, one of the things that struck me is all of the brushwood they use in various ways on the farm. So prunings from hedges and coppicing and pollarding and things. They've been using them as part of their efforts to create a series of leaky dams to create a wetland corridor on their farmland to slow down water flow when there's heavy rainfall, which hopefully means that the river that is in their watershed is less likely to flood downstream of them. And they also use willow brushwood to feed their sheep in the winter. So they gather up all of the branches, and when the sheep are brought in, when the weather gets cold, they feed them with them. And willow has a lot of medicinal properties. They just give them the branches whole, and the sheep will completely strip them. And that was one of the things that just kind of struck me. So the colourwork motif on that is inspired by all of that cut light branchy wood sort of laid down on the ground to help create their new wetland and also to feed their sheep. The yarn is naturally coloured Shetland, so there's the coloured yarns are Shetland, and the main colour is Dorset Down, so that's a natural cream, and then you've got the dark brown, and then on the ribbing edges is a really nice light moirette colour. So yeah, those are my planty knits. I really hope you've enjoyed seeing these. I'd love to hear if you'd be interested in more like these knits were inspired by, or like see patterns collected together around a theme, because it's quite fun. And so yeah, I'd love to hear if you have any planty inspired designs that you particularly like, and maybe I could include them in my next video. I've already started compiling my list, but I'd love to hear of any recommendations from other designers as well. So until next time, bye bye.